There's probably a line up there that confuses you. Maybe it confused you in the past and now you get it, or maybe you are still confused. If there's one question I get about the Apostles' Creed over and over again, it is, why do we say we believe in the Holy Catholic Church? I didn't think this was a Catholic church. It doesn't look like a Catholic church. I'm not dressed like a Catholic church leader. And some of you have questions about that. In fact, when we say the creed often, I'll have somebody who's a guest with us that's maybe a grandparent of somebody and says, I'm so grateful that you're a Catholic church. And I'll have to say, well, we're actually not a Catholic church, but we believe in the Catholic church. And that confuses them. Or they might say, I used to be Catholic, but now I'm not Catholic, and I didn't think this was a Catholic church. So what is going on here? And I have to explain that. So in the next 5 or so minutes, I'm going to explain away all of that confusion. And then I'm going to do the hard work, which is talk about what it means to be the Holy Catholic Church. So I've kind of got like 2 or 3 or 5 messages we're going to jumble together and get this done efficiently. Sound good? All right, let's jump to it. Hey, there's 3 terms in that line: Holy, Catholic, and Church. I want to unpack, and then we'll get to this idea of the community of saints. So let's actually define the terms. First term, holy. Holy is a term you find throughout the Bible from beginning to end. Holy always means to set aside something for a sacred use. So in the Old Testament, the early parts of the Bible, you might see that food was set aside for a sacred use in the temple, like a food was set aside to be a sacrifice given to God. Or clothes were set aside to be worn by the priest. Some of you have your Sunday clothes. In a way, that's kind of a holy idea. But the idea of holy moves in the New Testament, the second half of the Bible, to people becoming holy, set aside for a sacred use. Second term is the term Catholic. This is the most controversial or the most confused term. For the first 1,500 years of the church or so, the word Catholic meant global or universal or whole. It wasn't until the middle of the last millennium, around the Protestant Reformation, that Catholic got associated with one particular denomination, the Roman Catholic Church. So when we say Catholic, you'll always see Catholic with a lowercase c. What we mean is we believe that God's church is global. We believe that God's church spans the universe, that's across all age and time and history. We're not saying that we profess belief in one particular denomination. The third term is the word church. You're familiar with the church, but what does that actually mean? Well, the word church comes from the Greek word, or Greek words, ekklesia. Ekklesia means to call out. The church is God's people called by God out into a relationship with Him. So let's put all that together. When you say, I believe in the Holy Catholic Church, what you're saying is, I believe that God's people are called out by Him, set apart for sacred use in the world. That means God's people are called from every tribe, tongue, and territory to follow Him intentionally in every tribe, with every tongue, in every territory. Now you might be saying, okay, that sounds good, interesting, maybe I believe it, maybe I don't, but what's your biblical proof for that? Study with me the words of Jesus from John chapter 10. Jesus said, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. This from Jesus is a parable. It's a metaphor. Let's understand who's who, right? Who are the sheep? People, right? Who is the shepherd? Jesus. What differentiates the sheep that follow the shepherd and the sheep that don't? They listen to His voice. They know His voice. This phenomenon still exists any place in the world where there's sheep herds that intermingle. If that sheep herd hears the voice of their shepherd, they follow the voice of that one because they've been trained. They have a relationship. They know it's a safe trusting, worthy relationship. Those sheep aren't different because they look different or they have certain color eyes or they can jump a certain height. No, the sheep that are different are the ones who are obedient to their voice. Well, I just answered a bunch of your big theological interdenominational questions right there, right? What's a Christian according to the parable? A Christian is a person who follows the voice of Jesus. Maybe you've been with some other people and they've tried to distinguish who's who and who belongs and who fits and who's in and who's out. And they might say, well, is that man a Christian? I suppose it depends on if he listens to the voice of Jesus. How about that group of people over there? Are they Christians? They're Americans. They must be Christians. Well, I suppose it depends on if they listen to the voice of Jesus. Well, they go to church on Sunday. Does that make them a Christian? Suppose it depends on if they listen to the voice of Jesus. How about that pastor? He talks in front of people and reads the Bible. Is he a Christian? Suppose it depends on if they listen to the voice of Jesus. Well, they go to this church or that church, I suppose. You get the point here. You see, we love to kind of distinguish who's who and who's where. Catholics or Protestants, liberals and conservatives, men and women, Jew and Gentile, traditional or Pentecostal, slave or free. The world's been doing this for millenniums. What matters? I suppose it matters if they listen to the voice of Jesus. There's actually a biblical theme here. If you study the very first instruction that God gives to Abraham, Abraham's considered the father of faith. Genesis 12, God's invitation to Abraham is really simple. Follow me. And then a couple thousand years later, when Jesus is walking by the Sea of Galilee and he calls 12 men to be his disciples, his invitation is, follow me. It's really that simple. What's a Christian? A follower of Jesus. That's it. Don't make it too complicated. But notice the controversy here. Did you catch what Jesus said in verse 16? I'll put it up on the screen for you again. Jesus said, I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. You might be confused if you don't know a lot about this story about Jesus. Why was he rejected? Why was he killed? Why does he go to the cross? And there's really no way to answer that except to acknowledge that Jesus was rejected by Jews because he claimed that God cared for more than just Jews. God's love was not just defined to one ethnic group. I have other sheep that aren't in this pen. I must go to them. They'll listen to my voice just like some of you listen to my voice. What Jesus is describing in this parable or metaphor is lowercase c Catholic. That the church of Jesus spans the globe. It looks diverse. It is diverse. It's not just one time and one place and one people, but it's global. The good news about Jesus isn't reserved for one ethnic group, not the biological descendants of Abraham. That's really good news because I'm not one of them and neither are you. And yet we're invited in. But this brings up this really interesting problem. See, there's a problem in the first century among the Jews, and it's still our problem today. It's this, that we love to be included. And then once we're included, we tend to become exclusive. Do you know what I'm talking about? Let me give some examples. It's a child who hopes that they're going to get invited to the birthday party. And then they get invited only to be disappointed that Sally and Billy got invited. Or the high school student who works really hard to get on the honor roll or make the team or get invited to the certain party or the certain lunch table only to be disgusted that those other people made it too. Or it's adults at their worst. When we work really hard to get that promotion or that internship or that tax break or that immigration or that fancy restaurant invite only to be disappointed other people are there too. We love to be included, but then we have a tendency to become exclusive. We want grace for ourselves, but we have a tough time giving it to other people. We want mercy when we mess up, but when somebody else messes us up, we want to hold their feet to the fire. Am I getting through this morning? You see, that's God's plan. God's plan was to include and invite from every corner of the world. Racial and ethnic discrimination is a sin against your Creator and your neighbor. It's wrong. It's also wrong for us to come here today and assume we've got the best church in the world. And if every other church would just do what we do and sing songs like we sing and preach like we preach and gather like we gather, then they would be better because we've got it down pat. No, we're recipients of grace. And that means our job is to enjoy what we've had and bless others with it. And this is all, again, throughout the scriptures. Look again here at Genesis chapter 12. This is God's promise to Abraham. We pay attention to the first part. I will make you into a great nation. That sounds good. And I'll bless you. Sign me up. And all the people of the earth will be blessed through you. Really? Do we have to include them? Come on. Or, I'll make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and give them all these lands. Yeah, awesome. And through your offspring, all the nations will be blessed. That sounds crowded. I thought this land was for me. We can go throughout history and look at these times where God's people didn't act like God's people. The Third Reich in Germany, the religious wars of Europe, the Crusades, slavery and segregation in our land, apartheid in South Africa. In every one of those cases, there was leadership that claimed to be Christians. But were they following the voice of Jesus? I think we have to look back at history and say, no, they were clearly ignoring Jesus' invitation of love and kindness and justice, and instead prioritizing their own self-interest. And if that sounds like problems that they have back then in those places, let's just remember that we live next to Chicago, a city segregated by violence and racial discrimination consistently. And if you're saying, well, I'm not really from Chicago, like I didn't grow up here, because I didn't either, I can remember a phrase that I grew up hearing. You see, I grew up in a small Dutch community in a rural part of Iowa, and we had this cute phrase. We thought it was cute. It was, if you ain't Dutch, you ain't much. You know who taught me that phrase? A bunch of people I went to church with. I mean, we think it's fun, right, when we get included, but then we have a tendency to exclude. Hope I'm getting through this morning. We've been blessed to bless others. If you've been invited to a new life with Christ, it's to be an invitation to more people who need the invitation to that life. The impact of the Third Reich and the Crusades and slavery continues to be that the good news of Jesus gets lost, especially among those we should be trying to love. The lie of supremacy is making a comeback. Religious leaders continue to fall for the trap of grabbing power and influence and betraying the invitation of Jesus to love their neighbor. It's fueled in our time by fake news, social media, cheap theology, and skepticism. And what happens instead is we're called out, we're set apart, but it's not for a holy use, not for God's work. Instead, we're set apart and called out to make ourselves feel better and to step on others. When we say we believe in a holy Catholic church, and yet we act like a worldly, divisive, greedy, human organization that hates and discriminates our neighbor, we betray our message. The vision of God and His grace has always been meant to span the universe. Let me walk you through some scripture here. Joel chapter 2. I will pour out my Spirit, fill it in with me, on all people. 1 Corinthians 12. We were baptized into one body, Jews or Greeks, slave or free. We were all made to drink of one Spirit. There is not Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave or free, but Christ is all and in all. And maybe the most convicting of all, the vision of heaven from Revelation chapter 7. After this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, and people, and language, standing before the throne, before the Lamb. God's heart has always been for all the people of the earth. In a way, God's always been Catholic, lowercase c. So the church should be the most diverse organization in the world, and at times it has been. That was the power of the early church. Beautiful, compelling, inspiring by their generous invitation and hospitality. But when we operate like the rest of the world, we lose our power and nothing gets done. Okay, that's sermon number 1. Do I got time for one more? I'm not going to wait for your answer. And we can agree to that, or maybe you disagree with that, and that's okay. I think it's pretty biblically consistent. But here's the point I want to get at. The how. I think it's really hard to be a lowercase c Catholic Christian. It's a lot easier to live your life just hanging out with people who look like you and talk like you and think like you, isn't it? Like, we disagree a lot less. We have more things to talk about. There's certain things we don't want to deal with. But how do we do this? How does the church become effective? I think it's by being countercultural. So I want to take you to a text really quick. I just want to point out how countercultural the invitation of Jesus' followers are from Ephesians chapter 4. Okay? There's 5 kind of instructions at the beginning. Pay attention to them. You can count them out as you go. Number 1, this comes from verse 2, Ephesians 4. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient. Bear with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. That's the 5 instructions. Why should we do that? Because there's just one body, one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father who is over all and through all and in all. How does the church become effective? Number 1, it's through selflessness. Selfless sacrifice. Many of you are celebrating Father's Day today. If our parents did a great job, it's because they sacrificed for you. The way you show love to someone is through sacrifice. So if we're going to love the world in the way Christ calls us to love the world, it comes through selfless sacrifice. Number 2, if we're going to love the world really well, we're going to build bridges in a world of division and isolation. That's what Jesus' followers are called to do. I know it's hard. I know it means you're going to stand between other people, but you're not keeping them from each other. You're inviting both of them to meet through you in relationship. It might mean that at times you have your arms open and your arms are rejected, but there will be more times when the world is looking to follow you and find you into ways to making connection. That's what it means to look like as a Jesus follower. Building bridges, living selflessly. The church is effective, it's powerful when it obeys Jesus' teaching. And we saw that actually this week. We had 370 kids singing their hearts out, jumping up and down, having a great time because a bunch of people were invited to hear the story about God's love for them. And when that happens, lives get changed. So how does the church get effective? Well, let's go to the next part of Ephesians chapter 4, verse 7. But to each one of us, grace has been given as Christ apportioned it. Let's just read that first line again. Find yourself in there. Raise your hand if you're one of us. It should be all of you, okay? What the scripture is claiming is that every person in this room has been given gifts by God. Every one of you, whether you're small or tall, has been given grace by God. That's awesome. That's powerful. It's beautiful if you use it. Next line. So Christ himself gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, and the teachers to equip the people for works of service so that the body of Christ might be built up until we all reach unity in the faith and the knowledge of the Son of God and become, key word in the text here, mature, attaining the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. You've all been given different grace, right? No one here is the same. Nobody is completely identical to the person next to them. That's God's intentional, creative design. Different backgrounds, perspectives, abilities, capacities. We have so much to learn from each other. I can learn from my Catholic brother, my Baptist sister, my Pentecostal neighbor, my new-to-faith stranger I met at the grocery store. We can all grow each other up to be the body of Christ. Now, it's quite likely that you have a bunch of relationships in your life and people that you care about and want to bless. Maybe they're your children or your grandchildren, your friends, your students, your coworkers. And you're thinking, how do I help them figure out the love that God has for them? Well, are you using your gifts? Are you using the grace that God has given you? Are you sharing your story? Are you sharing your time? Are you sharing your interests? If you're sharing your life, they should be built up. And if you're looking around saying, all the people in my life aren't built up, you have to look in the mirror and say, are you using the gifts that God has given you? Are you building other people up? The church is effective when we use the grace we've received to build other people up. Again, we saw that this last week. I saw people use gifts of technology, snacks, leading games, leading Bible stories, leading children, calming kids, exciting kids, helping crying kids, and puking kids. We got it all. Because when the church does their job, people use their gifts. And there's something really fun about using your gifts. People grow up. That's what happens. Last part of the text here, verse 14. Then will no longer be infants, tossed back and forth by the waters, blown here and there by every wind of teaching, and by the cunning and craftiness of people in their deceitful scheming. Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become in every respect the mature body of Him who's the head. That's Christ. From Him, the whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work. God has called the church not just to be a holy huddle, but to be a communion of saints. A collection of people transformed by the grace of God in them. We aren't special by ourselves. None of us are really incredible, except for the fact that God works in us and through us. And the more we let that happen, the more power there is in us. It's hard to be Catholic, lowercase c, in the truest sense of the word. But when it happens, it's powerful. I often hear people say to me, I'm a Christian, I just don't go to church. Okay. How's that going for you? Oh, it's going great. I got my Sundays free. I don't have to give money to anybody, and nobody asked me to volunteer or sign up for anything. That does sound like a really easy, convenient life. Except you're missing some of the most important things about what it means to be a Christian. Number one, you're probably not blessing anybody else. And number two, nobody else is really blessing you. See, God's given you gifts to share. The grace God's given you is meant to be a blessing to somebody else, and somebody else's blessing is meant to go to you. Throughout human history, people gathered in communities, and it was the community that kind of rubbed off the hard edges. It exposed our weaknesses. It showed us the character defects we had in relationships. But as we become more individualistic, isolated, and divisive, people become more edgy. They're not getting worn off. They're not growing together. They're not maturing. They're not being built up. You know what happens if you're a Christian who doesn't go to church? You don't grow up. I know it's hard to be part of this community. I've been here for 11 years. Some of you have been here for even longer. But it's also powerful. I wouldn't be the person I was if people didn't use their gifts to bless me and challenge me and grow me up. And I hope that that's happening for you. If you want to grow in humility, go to church. You want to grow in patience, go to church. Be involved in the church. You want to grow in gentleness, serve in the church. Let God work through you. If we're going to grow and become who God calls us to be, a holy Catholic church, a community of saints, it's going to be by God working in us. So my hope and prayer for you is that when you hear the voice of the Good Shepherd, you follow. And by following him, you find the world blessed as he intends.